Hello, everyone. So just for you to understand what I do, my job is account technology strategist. I work with the enterprise accounts in Estonia and Latvia. And my main job is help these customers get the most value out of the products that they have. And nowadays, this evolves a lot around the digital transformation. Just for introduction, just to understand what is the digital transformation, what is causing it, and what do we have to think about when we are talking about the security kind of aspect of this as well. So there are several drivers for the digital transformation. Usually it's a new technology or the significant reduction of price. So currently the main driver is the price, because the public cloud is just making a lot of technologies that have been available but have been quite expensive and not applicable in many business scenarios. They've made it a lot cheaper and added this kind of a pay-as-you-go model to it. And this is behind it. Sorry. Okay. And what is it also affecting, which will also affect kind of the security solutions, is the pace of change. If if we look at the Fortune 500 companies and how long it has taken for these companies to reach a $1 billion value, then the average is 20 years. But if we look at the new companies that has been there, then it's drastically reduced, starting from Google with 8 years down to Snapchat and Xiaomi, which is like 2 years. And this causes a lot of disruption in the business, and it causes the business, or it forces the businesses to change constantly and very quickly. Another kind of, I wouldn't say side effect, but let's say regulation that is actually affecting is GDPR. I will not focus that much on the GDPR today, but this is also addressing what the trends are, where the trends are going. Regarding the GDPR, many people have not read it themselves. It's quite a kind of impressive document, let's say. If you want to have a short summary, then Microsoft has created them in local languages for Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And you can get the links from the slide deck later. So a few of these kind of this information that you see is nothing new. But I wanted to show this because if we start talking about digital transformation or the kind of security topics, how to address them in a situation of change or when we're adopting cloud, then these especially the last two ones, are very much on the table and they're very valid. The shadow IT. The reason for the shadow IT is very simple, because people, you have goals, you need to do work, and if it's easier for you to do the work with tools that you get from the, let's say, open market instead of what your IT is providing you, then you would use that. And IT budget growth as well. The main issues we see with the customers is that it's really difficult for the IT to tie the value of the IT projects to the business goals, or to show the business value in the IT change. And if you're not able to do it, then it's really difficult to get more funding for the IT budget also. So today we are actively working on, let's say, digital transformation, as I would put it, with about 4 to 5 biggest enterprises in the Baltics. And usually how the digital transformation begins, it usually begins with an IT project. That's commonly change. In our case, it's when you start adopting Office 365, the cloud capabilities of it, then you will get, this is the trigger. In many cases, it's perceived as an IT project initially. You start off with, let's say the IT usually starts off with this as just a new version of Office, but how it changes kind of the business processes is what makes it actually the transformation. And transformation itself is a buzzword. Like it's what it really means is it means a lot of change is going to happen. And in many cases, it means the fundamental principles will change, or like how you have been doing things will have to change because of it. So some of the examples are IT self-service, or IT service, which will move towards self-service. And why this is happening, or why this is important also to do, is if you have the fast, like paced, changing environment, then the IT will no longer be able to service as much kind of, or it will not be able to build all the structures for the people. If you enable the people to do it themselves, it's much more scalable. And this is the main driver behind it. Other thing, mobility. Mobility is a very kind of, I think everyone is using or is working nowadays from everywhere. The question is what you can do from there. Like, is it just the emails? Can you access some applications? What kind of data? Which devices? Which networks? This is all about the working from anywhere. And this will bring a lot of questions around how you can access data, where, which devices, who. I will focus on it later a bit more. Regarding this data security, also, we see that many companies try to kind of, let's say, heavily regulate how the people, like where the people have access, and like blocking thumb drives that you couldn't kind of take the data on a physical drive away. But as a trend, we see that this is actually feeding the shadow IT. So if you're not allowing people to work comfortably, like by blocking the blocking the capabilities, then this is like work still needs to be done. They will find another way. And so the focus should be more around enabling them to do it the right way, like giving them the tools that are under your control, but also giving them the accountability for the data. So the IT itself will not be, let's say, in many cases, it would not be responsible for the data, but the end user is responsible for the data. Of course, it kind of varies depending on the measures vary depending on the kind of sensitivity of the data. If we're talking about like very high impact, super secret data, then the policies or the measures have to be more rigorous as well. Policies. I think everyone knows paper policies don't really work. We need to automate them or kind of build them in your solutions as much as possible. And internal competence, this is another really important topic. If you look at the kind of variety of solutions that you have available today, and it's changing really quickly. Like in 3 to 4 years, you can be using a lot of different kind of technologies compared to what you're using today. And building all that competence internally is super expensive. And it's in many cases, you don't even have these people available on the market. It's like a high competence IT, let's say, employees, they're really hard to find. And that's why this kind of strategic partnerships are really important, to really kind of have a partner there who is expert in that solution. And just as long as you use this solution, you will have this partner kind of part of your team as well. So I talked a bit about the security landscape. This is the way it's changing. Today we still see, especially like it differs from the company size. But if you look at the really large corporations, we still see a lot of focus around perimeter defense. It's not that this is not important, but you really need to focus additionally, let's say, on the identity defense or the identity management, because a lot of or I would say majority of the data breaches are happening from compromised user identity. And the question how you do it is really, or if you do it, is determining like a lot of how secure you're actually going to be. And well, there is no surprise. There is no absolute security. It's all about mitigating the risk, not kind of trying to build like an impenetrable corporation. Around the mobility, when we start to kind of implement mobility solutions with these customers who are in this, let's say, digital transformation, then there is a lot of, basically most of these kind of, there is a lot of effort going into changing the processes that is in many cases not taken into account in the beginning when we start planning this transformation or change. And the result of this is that it's there are no funds and no resources internally available to do it, and this will like make the projects very long. What is so some of the examples are like what questions or like what do you need to consider as soon as you start using the cloud applications and opening up mobile or let's say mobile workloads, then you have to start or you have to basically decide who you're gonna let to access this specific app, and that's for every applications. Like every, if we're talking about Office 365, let's say SharePoint Online, do you allow access to SharePoint Online? Who do you allow access? Which networks? Is it only internal? Is it external as well? Partners? Which locations? Do you want to limit it to Europe, the worldwide? Do you want to limit it by if your devices are managed or unmanaged? And it's not only about kind of creating this policy, but in many cases that translates into actually rethinking the whole IT strategy. And because what are you basing these decisions on? Like you have to have something to kind of say that, okay, we are allowing access to vendors from external network because this is helping us to reach some of our business goals. And if you don't have these connections, these decisions are really hard to make. Another topic that will raise is the SaaS applications or like third-party applications. Because if you are installing if you're installing on-premise applications, you don't have these questions. For example, what information is actually sent between you and the kind of service provider? What is stored in your place? What is stored in the service provider? And if, let's say, in a case of, or similar case to the WannaCry, when the service provider is compromised, how much will it impact you? Like what actually can be affected on your end if something happens to the service provider? And this information, again, like let's say, what we see is many of these SaaS application providers are not really ready to answer all these questions. When we put more focus or more responsibility to the user, we don't want to leave them alone with kind of now being responsible for the data security or for the not accidentally leaking any data. So what we really want to do is we want to help them to kind of be successful in that new reality, let's say. And for that, a lot of these kind of capabilities, you have to consider if this is something that you need and if this is something that will help your users. For example, the shadow IT discovery, the way you use the shadow IT discovery, it's not for punishing the people who are using the shadow IT, but it's much more beneficial if you use it as an input of what the users are missing. What do they really need to kind of do their everyday work? Because there is a reason why they're using it. Automated risk scoring. This is an important topic if you're talking about SaaS applications. Like if you don't want to like dig really deeply into what kind of data is sent and so on, then sorry, this automated risk scoring will help you determine the risk based on basically the knowledge we gather from everyone using this product. And if we see some patterns, then this is what can help you to kind of raise the flag when there is a threat. DLP, data leakage protection, many are already using some solutions for this. Device management, line of business applications, this is about the kind of working anywhere. If today many, let's say, big corporations, because this is the part I see the most, they have a lot of kind of, let's say, old custom-built applications. And if you want to enable working from anywhere, then in many cases you have to make these applications available also outside of your network. And there are actually like reverse proxy and application gateway solutions that can help you do that. And of course, we cannot forget the on-premise part. Classifying and labeling the data, that is something a lot of companies are not doing today. And again, it's something, if you want to do it centrally, this is really difficult. Like you have tools that can automatically label the data, but are you able to provide kind of patterns or signatures, how they can identify that this data is highly impactable or this one has a like medium or low business impact. So this is best, or again, to be left to users to decide what is the actual sensitivity of the data, but to have the users or to have the users able to determine it, you need to kind of invest a lot in training them and making this very easy and transparent for them. And regarding what the previous gentleman was talking here about kind of protecting against the attacks, this is something we do every day. I think every corporation has antivirus and firewall and let's say basic security capabilities in place. But today, as the identity is the kind of biggest threat, then the question is like, how do you understand that some of your employees' identity has been compromised? How do you know that there has been breach already? And again, the machine learning based tools have really made it easier, or let's say made it possible to kind of monitor the behavior of the users and then determine if some users' behavior drastically changes at some point of time, and this will raise you a flag to investigate. And you will have the same kind of questions in the cloud. Like it's like I would like to kind of stress the importance of the identity protection and the identity management, because for sure you want to have the same identity in the cloud and on the premise, and you want to make sure that you're not only kind of protecting the on-premise part, but you're also kind of looking what's going on in your cloud. To sum it up, there are a couple of kind of takeaways I want to leave you with. If you're starting this kind of cloud journey, or if you're starting to think about putting solutions to the cloud, I would strongly recommend to get board level, let's say, support for this, because the investments that you will need to make is not, it's not only the licenses, it's most of the investments will have to go into adoption. And not the technical adoption, but like changing the processes, training the people, agreeing the new rules, and so on. This is where the major work will be. Do the change management. This is, in many cases, or let's say in the successful digital transformations, we see that usually there is a separate project manager or even a team to drive the digital transformation. Because there is like, no one has this time from their kind of daily activities to do this on the side. And very important, don't do it alone. Use the partners, use the experience that they have already. And this will make it a lot faster for you, a lot easier. You will make a lot less mistakes. And if we're talking about the cloud solutions, they're changing so fast. It's even tough for the partners to kind of be on track. So you really need, for the employees from a side of your daily work, it's not possible. And this is where partners can really help. Okay, that's it from me, my side. Do you have any questions?
Does anyone have any questions? No? Well,
you've been quite general, so it's quite difficult to specify the question, actually. But I would like for you to try to elaborate on this issue of data management, and if you say that the sensitivity and of data is better to be brought to the end user's responsibility, and that you said that it's difficult to be managed centrally. How to ensure this balance? Because at some point, end users also are the risks themselves, in terms of that you have to have the tools to track the compliance to data management of by the end users. It's at the same time that they also have to, they don't have to omit the data that needs to be filled in by or brought by the end users. So what is the best practice how to manage this from your perspective, from your experience in different organizations maybe?
Yes, I'm sorry for being general. The reason behind it is that most of these kind of digital transformations are ongoing, and we cannot kind of talk about specific customers. But on the topic, the best, or let's say the first solutions have been based on let's say the roles of people. So you kind of, different roles of people usually have access to, let's say, different sensitivity data. So you start usually from there. And of course you have to consider also that there are some applications which hold specifically more sensitive data, and it doesn't mean that you give up the whole control from the IT, but just let's say for the a regular back office worker will get a lot more let's say responsibility and let's say less restrictions on how to operate with the data, because these are usually the roles that have a large variety of data. They can have like a high impact data and most of the cases very low impact data. and there is no like let's say very best practice that I can really recommend on that.
Yeah, but if you have a big organization where you have to understand that you have a standardized way of processing data across all the levels of organization, for example. And even if it's role-based, so you need to somehow, in order to ensure the quality of data, for example. So basically, I think that you need to centralize it to a certain extent, that you can kind of manage it at the minimum level of the requirements, or I don't know, it's...
I completely agree. If you have a very standardized way of processing some of the data, then you don't want to kind of break it. But you have a lot of data that is totally unmanaged today. Like that's what I see in most corporations. Like if you go from the away from the let's say the very front line where the processes are very standardized, then you will get this kind of more chaotic world where you have this very high mix of different data, and there is like a very general control, like either you kind of restrict all of it or none of it. But also, like this is if you look at the chaotic part, then this is where you want to apply, or you want to give the people tools to actually be able to label the data themselves, and then you apply the rules based on that labeling. Any other questions? I have one question for you. How many of your companies are going through the digital transformation today? Done? Wow. I will catch you after the after the session. Okay. But then thank you.